Well, you're in for a real treat today. We have Ashley Armstrong back. Of course, she's the farmer, the passionate farmer who's creating some of the healthiest foods on the planet and doing it against the grain and suffering great consequences because it's been targeted by the Michigan Department of Agriculture. And she survived that. And she's doing well, and she's offering product that almost each and every one of us loves, and that's some of the best cheese on the planet because it's made with some of the finest milk, raw milk from northern Indiana, southern Michigan, that has the natural grasses that are high in this essential fat that is really hard to come by. It's called pentadecanoic acid. And it's hard to, the only place you get that typically in your diet is in dairy, and ideally raw dairy that's been grass fed. If you're getting dairy from a cow that's been eating grains, you're not going to get it because it's in the grasses. So we talk about this and so many other wonderful things and updates that you're going to love it, and I hope you enjoyed it half as much as I did.
Cheese was a staple in our ancestors' diet. Like, we've been consuming cheese for close to 10,000 years. Mainstream advises you against dairy and instead wants you to use the plant-based alternatives where, yeah, like you can make plant-based alternatives of cheese in a lab. It does not compare nutritionally at all. So in the early 1990s, Pfizer generated something called FPC. It is produced in a lab from a genetically modified enzyme. And so it's actually not really natural. So basically they will take a gene out of an animal cell's DNA string, and then they'll insert it into a bacteria, commonly like a yeast or a mold. They'll take that DNA, put it into the yeast or mold DNA string, and then that will initiate the production of the chymosin enzyme. And that chymosin enzyme is what coagulates the milk, and that is what's naturally occurring inside the stomach chamber of a cow. And so then the host culture is then like cultivated and fermented. And so the biggest problem here is that this is made in a lab. And so trace amounts of these mold and fungus have been found in these enzymes, which are then used to make the cheese. And so people who are allergic to mold or fungus, it can cause like toxicity or allergenic responses. It's also been shown to disrupt gut health, likely because, you're inserting strange microbial populations into your gut. So there's toxicity, allergenic, and gut health concerns of this FPC. So I knew that when we started making cheese for our food co-op, I was like, we have to use animal rennet. It's the only option. And sent Dr. Mercola some, and you seem to digest it well compared to other cheeses. I think that there's a number of reasons for that, but one of which is I think it is very important to pay attention to the rennet used when you buy and consume cheese.
Welcome, everyone. Dr. Mercola helping you take control of your health. And today you're in for a real treat because we have back with us Ashley Armstrong, who is, if you haven't read her many previous articles, she writes a weekly column for us, a regenerative farmer and one of the most informed individuals on the practical implementations of bioenergetic medicine, which is the form of the philosophy, rather the form is a philosophical approach to how to eat and optimize your biology for maximum energy. And that's what it's all about, creating maximum energy. And I'm actually writing a whole book about that. It's called Cellular Health. And Ashley was a great assistance to me in that book. And she has also done some other great things because, as you well know, she has a farm, her personal farm of 2,000 chickens, and she's creating many more. So when you have chickens, you have a problem with predators. So she has introduced me to a breed of animal that is called a livestock guardian dog. And there's many breed. That's a type of animal that fills this role. And one of the most common breeds is the Great Pyrenees. And they're bred with other species like the Anatolian and some others. And thanks to Ashley, I was able to secure a male, and his name is Joy. And Ashley gifted me her new puppy, who is now 3 months old as we're recording this. And she's at my house now with Joy. So it's his future mate. They will be having puppies next year, and we'll probably have a litter of at least half a dozen, maybe more. And I'm not sure what we're going to do with those, but we'll find a good.
Very important though. Joy is not related to Grace. Joy came from a different farm.
Yes, he came from a farm in Tennessee, and Ashley's farm was in Michigan. No relationship at all. Though they look really similar. There's a lot of characteristics, but the dogs say that about people too. I'm sure they all look the same. So it's been a great delight, and I'm really glad that we have them. And so with all that preface, we're going to talk today about a really important topic, which is cheese. I had not consumed cheese for probably 2 decades. I've had it occasionally, but consistently avoided cheese for over 2 decades because I noticed that when I ate it, my kidney function, which was already compromised from mercury, from having my amalgams removed improperly from a non-biological dentist, was further compromised when I ate regular cheese. And I didn't know why or how, but it was very clear. I did many experiments to confirm that. And I knew without any shadow of a doubt that my kidney function deteriorated quite dramatically when I had cheese. But Ashley helped me understand that there is a reason for that, that most of the cheese that's consumed in this country should not be consumed because it's unhealthy. Not that, even though it's the base of the cheese, which can be from Amish organic regeneratively raised cows that produce milk, raw milk. I mean, the finest raw material to start with, but then they have to use an enzyme to create the milk. It's called rennet. And if it's used synthetically, they call it plant-based to greenwash it, then there's lots of complications and problems. So I'm going to let Ashley do the talking now since she's here, and she is going to explain this and a lot more about the cheese. And the reason we're talking about this, her cheese from these Amish farmers is going to be available very shortly. So welcome and thank you for joining us today, Ashley.
Thank you, Dr. Mercola. It's always a pleasure to chat with like-minded individuals, and I'm so happy that Grace is doing well. It provided so much joy for me to see her, so I can't wait to see her and Joy together sometime soon.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah. And then next year with their puppies, that will be amazing. That'll be fun. So for anyone that has a farm or are looking for a livestock guardian dog, stay tuned next year for Grace and Joy's litter. Cheese is one of my favorite topics, and it's honestly one of the first things that I learned from Dr. Ray Peat, because I avoided cheese for so long. You're told, like, mainstream tells you how bad dairy is, right? Like, I mean, you saw problems with your kidney function, but mainstream advises you against dairy and instead wants you to use the plant-based alternatives where, yeah, like you can make plant-based alternatives of cheese in a lab. It does not compare nutritionally, like, at all. And cheese was a staple in our ancestors' diet. Like, we've been consuming cheese for close to 10,000 years. And it was a staple because it could be taken with them on trips when they like explored new areas. So cheese is one of my favorite things. And I think one of the most important reasons for consuming cheese is the calcium component. And I know so many people like poo-poo the idea of calcium because a common theme in mainstream is that calcium intake leads to calcification, when that's just so false. And that's where I learned from Dr. Ray Peat. No, calcification is caused by a low calcium intake. And this, I think, is the really fascinating part. So, Dr. Mercola, what do EMFs do to our cells? What happens when our cells are exposed to EMFs?
Well, from a mechanism standpoint, it's very similar to what the other mitochondrial poisons do, and that those other ones would be seed oils, which you're quite passionate about, as I am, and also estrogen. And you say, well, I don't take estrogen. I'm a male. What is an issue? Well, there's something called EDCs, endocrine disrupting chemicals, which I think are misnamed. They should be estrogen disrupting chemicals. It was almost every one of the EDCs, which are predominantly in plastics, and we are bombarded with plastics. And I don't know which issue is worse. They're both terrible, but interestingly, that and EMFs all have the same mechanisms. I first understood the mechanism when I wrote a book on EMF and studied it really carefully. Studied it for like a few years before I wrote my book. And the mechanism is quite simple. It involves calcium, as you suggested, in that the concentration of calcium outside the cell, the extracellular calcium, is about 50,000 times greater than that inside the cell. So there are, in the case of calcium, there's a type of receptor on the outside surface of the cell membrane, which is called the VGCC, the voltage-gated calcium channel receptor. And it's thought that when you are exposed to EMFs, it somehow catalyzes and triggers this, and it allows that calcium to go inside the cell. And once it's inside the cell, it increases the release of superoxide, which is reactive oxygen species, and then nitric oxide, which is a reactive nitrogen species, and it makes another reactive nitrogen species, which is called peroxynitrite, which is really, really terrible. And many healthcare professionals aren't aware of that. And some even molecular biologists, which should know better, haven't even heard of that. I could think of a few in particular because it's a relatively new concept, but nevertheless, this peroxynitrite is more toxic and damaging than hydroxyl free radicals because it lasts about 1,000 times longer. So it can travel outside the mitochondria, even between cells, and cause tissue damage, wrecking your DNA and tissues. So all this extra calcium is part of that trigger. And perhaps you can help us understand how that calcium in the cheese and dairy, ideally raw dairy, grown regeneratively, taken from regeneratively nurtured cows, can help that situation.
So the same mechanism that estrogenic foods like flax and plastics and things like that, the same mechanism applies here. When your calcium intake is low, that causes the parathyroid hormone, the PTH, to rise. And guess what that leads to? An influx of calcium into the cells.
Same thing.
mechanism. Same
Wow.
mechanism. So that raises the stress metabolism, right? The cells aren't structured properly, so they don't function properly, right? So increasing stress, increasing inflammation. And the biggest thing that parathyroid hormone does, PTH, is it's one of the main bone regulators. And so when PTH is elevated, that causes an increase in bone resorption and a decrease in bone formation. So it's basically increasing the body's requirements to go mine for calcium in your bones because you're not consuming enough dietarily. Your blood level of calcium is so important to your like homeostasis function that your body does a really good job keeping that in a very narrow window, right? So like calcium blood tests are kind of meaningless because your body has to keep that or else you will die. And so it does that, it keeps that very narrow window by regulating like your dietary intake and then pulling from other parts of your body. So when your calcium intake is low, that leads to elevated PTH, more calcium influx into the cell, causing a whole host of metabolic problems, increase in stress, and then a decrease in the amount of bone formation. So there's like well-documented studies showing their increased like calcification rates, increased bone problems with a low calcium intake. And the biggest issue that we're seeing today in modern times is that it is very hard to get calcium in your diet unless you consume dairy, and it's very easy to get phosphorus. And so Dr. Ray Peat discussed the calcium to phosphorus ratio. It's a very delicate balance of minerals in our body. And the studies are very clear. Like we want a higher calcium to phosphorus intake in our diet. That leads to a whole host of metabolic benefits, health improvements, increase in bone health, cardiovascular health. And in modern times, people are discouraged from eating dairy, so their calcium intake goes way down. And then it's very easy to get phosphorus. So phosphorus is going to be high in grains, meat, and then unfortunately as preservatives and additives. So phosphates are increasingly being used in various industries as preservatives. In fact, they're adding phosphates into industrial made cheese to help with like the melting capabilities and like preserving the cheese because it's just like a dead material, right? So phosphates are like sneaking their way into the food system. And the best part about it is you don't have to put it on the label. It isn't necessarily on the nutrition facts. And so again, just another danger of relying on like heavily processed food and the importance of like making your meals from scratch. So in modern times, everyone is able to hit their phosphorus intake pretty easily. It's becoming increasingly more challenging to get your calcium intake. And we want our calcium to phosphorus intake to be as close to 1-to-1 as possible, and we see benefits when that is slightly above.
Mm-hmm.
And you can track that on Chronometer. It's so easy. You can just put your food intake that you have for the day, and then Chronometer will show you your calcium and your phosphorus intake, and then you can assess the ratio.
Soon to be Food Buddy, because we are making an app that goes with our book. It's called Food Buddy, and the app is called Mercola Health Coach. We'll have a far superior and much better interface and more comprehensive. So you'll be able to find out that ratio real quickly. And you do it by just taking a picture of your food.
Yes. So Dr. Mercola asked me, like, and I think a few others, like, what problems do you have with Chronometer? And so I sent him all my problems, and Food Buddy is going to fix that. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, we're really excited too.
Yeah.
Now, I'm wondering, as you mentioned the phosphorus issue, that the most common form of industrial fertilizer in the country is NPK, synthetic.
Yeah.
Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So is it phosphorus when industrial fertilizers are like that are used, does that increase the phosphorus content of the food?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. However, I do know that like this synthetic phosphorus, so inorganic phosphorus, I believe, the absorption rate is close to 100%, whereas phosphorus in like natural food sources like meat and grains, it's closer to 50%. So we absorb so much more of this like unnatural man-made phosphorus that we really weren't exposed to like 100 years ago. So that's a really good question. Now I want to dive into that. We should ask Perplexity.
Yeah, Perplexity, that's for sure. A lot of people were a little annoyed with Perplexity because it wasn't answering correctly about COVID, but that was not the point at all. Of course it's not. But the 99.99% of other things you want to ask it about, unless it's, another censored area, is going to tell you perfectly. And not only tell you that, but rarely, it does hallucinate. It does hallucinate. Like the other elements, just hallucinates a lot less. So it doesn't, and the hallucination is when it fabricates an answer, but it's doing that because it wants to serve you. It doesn't want to disappoint you, and it doesn't know. It only does it when it doesn't know an answer. It's just not throwing it in there to mix you up. It just doesn't know, so it makes one up. Yeah. Typically, that's what's.
It'll get better.
Perplexity. Oh, it will for sure. There's no question. It'll be resolved.
Yeah.
So,
other health benefits of calcium intake. So when I was on carnivore and my calcium intake was really low, so I had a very unbalanced calcium to phosphorus intake. My phosphorus intake was really high because all meat. I would develop these like white plaques on the back side of my front teeth, like down there. And since being mindful of my calcium to phosphorus intake, like that has gone away completely. And so again, making sure that you're eating adequate calcium is going to be important for like bone health and dental health, but there's so many other benefits. One of the main things is like maintaining that proper cell structure, which can lead to improved energy production, improved metabolism, make it easier to lose weight. Also going to lead to better blood pressure regulation, since low dietary calcium has been shown to like increase blood pressure. And a really cool part about calcium intake is that it's going to lower oxalate absorption. And, oxalates are a big hot topic these days, but there is well-documented studies showing a linear plot where the more calcium you intake dietarily, the less oxalates you absorb through your intestines. So it helps reduce the chances of oxalate toxicity. Sorry, I meant linear, but it's a decline line. So the more calcium you intake, if calcium's on the dietary calcium's on the x-axis, oxalate absorption is on the y-axis. It's a downward line.
Yeah, it's really important. And oxalates are a significant factor for many people. And but I believe they're only a factor because their microbiome, their gut flora is impaired. It's disrupted. It's less than ideal, because if you have a healthy gut flora, there are bacteria in your gut that will digest these. One of them is Oxalobacter formogenes, and there's others that do it too. So if they're there, they can eat the oxalates, and oxalates are simply the chemical term for it is dicarboxylic acid, which maybe gives you an idea that it has something to do with CO2, and it does. It's just merely two carbon dioxide molecules, I think, in an ester bond. I'm not sure of the bond, but it might be an ester bond. There's two of them together, and these bacteria digest it, and their byproduct is carbon dioxide, which is pretty interesting. Yeah. So, but I wanted to mention that the phosphate, what you said implies that it's dangerous, and it is. in excess, and that's the key, because you need phosphate. I mean, that's part of ATP, right? Adenosine triphosphate, 3-phosphate. So if you don't have phosphates, you're going to run into a problem. But the issue and the challenge is almost everyone's phosphorus is far too high relative to their calcium. You can make the counter argument that their calcium is far too low relative to their intake of phosphorus. So it's primarily more the calcium. And Ray Peat, I believe, almost was at least 2-to-1 and maybe 3-to-1 calcium over phosphorus. Maybe you can comment on that.
I think he was closer to 1.3 to 1.
1.3. I didn't mix up.
The reason being is milk and cheese, so any dairy products, they are a great calcium source, but they also contain phosphorus because, like you said, it's an important mineral. But milk and dairy, it's a balanced calcium to phosphorus ratio, so there's more calcium than phosphorus. And so if that gets factored into your daily total intake, it leads to a rise in your calcium to phosphorus ratio. So I think he was closer to the 1.3 to 1, but he was very hesitant of overconsumption of meat. Like that was something that he talked about because of this reason, and because of the whole methionine and other potentially problematic amino acids. And so it's funny when you look in like other animal literature, so like dogs, goats, the calcium to phosphorus ratio is discussed quite a bit, but it's never really discussed in like human nutrition stuff much. But it's something that they used to talk about back in the early 1900s when Dr. Peat like was being trained on these things, and then just like lost touch of that. And honestly, I think it's because of the rise in big food and wanting to have like intellectual property of all of our food that we consume. And so they realized, hey, plant-based alternatives are so much more profitable than, traditional dairy foods. They can make so much more money with these plant-based alternatives. And there's like a study by McKinsey company that documents that plant-based alternatives is more profitable for these big food companies. So there's just been a huge shift in like what is discussed in human nutrition.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. Yeah. So, and I think I've evolved my position on meat consumption. I still think it's a valuable and important part of health. I know a number of people disagree with that, but there are certain nutrients in meat that are very difficult to get. But you don't. The key thing, and the key point, and I want to emphasize what you're saying, is that you don't need a lot of meat. And I think Pete was right. I mean, you can get by with maybe optimally and be healthy with maybe 2 or 3 pounds a month. That's it. I mean, it's not a lot. Some people eat that in a day, but you can do that in a month and still be fine. You don't. In fact, the converse is, the high level of phosphorus and methionine are both highly problematic. They are anti-longevity, and there's a number of articles I reviewed that posit that this excess phosphorus is one of the most important aging nutrients that's out there, accelerating the aging process by having excessive phosphates.
Yeah, Dr. Peat discussed extensively this study. I think it was by like Kemi et al. From early 2000s, like around 2008. And it showed that when you increase your dietary calcium intake, it definitely led to lower levels of PTH, parathyroid hormone, and improved like bone regulation. However, not even a high calcium intake could make up for the problems that a very high phosphorus intake was causing. And so that's why I think it's important to just ensure that you're not going overboard with your phosphorus intake. And like you mentioned, it's so easy to get phosphorus. If you eat some meat every day, a little bit of meat every day, if you eat some amount of grains, like I like sourdough bread, but other types of grains have some phosphorus in it as well. You're probably going to be good. It's much easier to get the phosphorus intake. You have to go out of your way to make sure that you're consuming enough calcium, given the modern food environment that we face today.
And I think many people know you for your work with raising chickens.
Yeah.
And I think this is a good place to tangent to another source of calcium, which is one I use every day, actually twice a day. I think I take a teaspoon of this twice a day. And that is
eggshell.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like if someone is really not for dairy, like granted, when we dive into like this cheese source, I'm going to make the claim that significantly more people can digest this cheese better than like cheese you find at the grocery store. However, if you are one of those people where you just can't tolerate any amount of dairy at all, or you don't want to, or you don't have a good source, eggshell powder is going to be a very cheap alternative. And also like very dark leafy greens like collard greens. You can also do like bone meal powder or pearl powder. Those are all great calcium sources. But like if you're buying eggs already, just save the shells and make your own eggshell calcium powder.
Well, and it definitely has calcium. It's calcium carbonate specifically, and
Yeah.
it's a really good source of it. But what I like it for is what it also has, which is the trace minerals.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the best trace mineral supplements you can get, and, and it's free.
Yeah.
It's normally a waste product, so we're encouraging people to understand that it's not a waste product. It's actually a food product that can provide a significant benefit to your health and your family's health, and give you essentially a free source of calcium. Especially if you're choosing to avoid dairy for whatever reason.
Are you still using it to brush your teeth?
I do. I use it to brush my teeth. It's the ultimate. I mix it. All you have to do is take the powder and mix it with an MCT oil. I use C8. We have a product called Ketone Energy, which is really good. And that combination is pretty magnificent. The MCT oil works pretty well for oral hygiene when you combine it with the eggshell. It's like sandpaper of sorts. So you're really cleaning your teeth quite well.
Yeah. And it's well documented to remineralize your teeth. Like, I want to say it was in Japan. There were some really cool studies that came out showing the remineralization powers of eggshell powder. I think there are some commercial eggshell toothpaste brands out there, but like, guys, it's so easy to make yourself. Like, literally save your eggshells in like a bag, put it in the freezer. When you have enough of it, you can either like boil or lightly bake to like sterilize or get rid of any like impurities. And then I just grind them in a little coffee grinder, and then you've got your eggshell powder. And then I like to mix it with coconut oil or MCT oil, like you said. Yeah. And you can add like a little peppermint extract, like a tiny little bit, if you want a little bit of like, it's nice to have like good, like smelling breath, right? So you can kind of add whatever you want there, but really the base of it, eggshell powder and MCT oil, that MCT oil or coconut oil is literally antimicrobial in your mouth. And then you've got the remineralization power of the eggshell.
Yeah, the coconut probably more so because it has lauric acid, which is carbon 14 chain carbon fat. The MCT not so much because it doesn't have that. But the benefit of MCT oil, it's a liquid at room temperature. More frequently, especially in the winter, coconut oil is rock solid, so you can't use it. That's a slight problem. Yeah. So I want to thank you for introducing me to that, because it's a really useful thing. And I'm surprised that you, I would have thought with all those chickens you have, you would have had a lot more eggshells to not be using a coffee grinder, because I have a lot less chickens than you, and we save them, and we go through maybe at least a dozen eggs a day in my house.
Well, I make sure our dogs get some, and I also like to give some back to the chickens too.
Okay.
I don't use them all for myself. Yeah.
Yeah, but when we grind it, we use like a big Vitamixer. Every week or two, we're pounding it down, because I give it to my dogs, I give it to the chickens. I think it's crazy good if you have chickens. Yeah. Why not feed them back their eggshells? Because they need the calcium to make the eggshells. Yeah. So you have to recycle it. You don't have to, but it's wise to. So it's a full circle, and we are likely going to be offering this as a product in the future for those who, for whatever reason, just don't want to do it and just want someone to do it for them, and it'll be good. Now, one of the cautions that you didn't share is that if you're getting eggs, especially from Ashley, or you're raising them yourself, then you've got to wash the shell before you crack it open, because it's going to be dirty. So maybe you can guide us through that, and why do we want to shell? Why do we want to wash the shell before we eat and not until we eat?
So if you buy eggs at the grocery store, they've most likely been washed, and it washes off the chicken's natural bloom. So Mother Nature is amazing, right? When a chicken lays an egg, right when it's coming out of the chicken's butthole, there's this like wet looking coating, right? So when a chicken initially lays the egg, it looks wet, and then it like almost immediately dries. And that's what's called the natural bloom. And so it is a like membrane barrier around the egg that prevents microbes and stuff from coming inside the shell. And so it's important to remember that eggshell, it's not a solid surface. We can't see it visually, but there are a ton of little pores, right? And so that natural bloom around the egg protects other things from coming inside the shell. So that's why it's really important if you buy unwashed eggs or if you raise chicken like eggs for yourself, don't wash those until it's time for you to eat the egg, because that bloom, if you wash it, it removes the bloom, and so then the eggs will go bad quicker because things will be able to come inside the egg at a faster rate. So keep that natural bloom on there and let that, it'll just lengthen the shelf life, right? Unwashed eggs, every other country uses unwashed eggs. You can keep unwashed eggs on a countertop for several months. If you put it in the fridge, lasts a very long time. So when you're going to make eggshell powder, if you're going to save your shells or whenever you're cooking your eggs, don't wash your eggs until you're about to eat them. I don't even wash my shells, but if you're going to wash them, wait until right before you eat them.
Yeah, well, and which we would recommend, because ideally you want to use the eggshell itself.
Yeah.
But if you do wash them and you're not eating them, then you have to put them in the fridge. Otherwise, they're going to be potentially contaminated. So you have to be careful there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it occurred to me, I've been to other countries before where they don't, or at least I suspected they didn't, but because the eggs that were being sold were not in the refrigerator. But I wonder, they seemed all clean. I don't remember having seen dirty ones. Is it possible that they wash them and don't put them in the fridge?
Yeah, I don't think the shelf life would be that long. There'd have to be a relatively quick turnover, but yeah. Also, I mean, if someone keeps their like nest boxes really clean, which can be difficult out on pasture, then you can make really clean shells for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's a good important point to know.
Yeah.
That many people may not be aware of. But it's useful. So now, when I introduced you initially, I talked about the problems that I had with synthetic rennet, and that it recommended that anyone who is eating cheese that doesn't use animal rennet should seriously consider stopping that practice. So why don't you tell the backstory of that and help them understand why?
Yeah. So cheese is made from milk, but you have to wonder what coagulates the milk, right? Like what separates the different components of the milk? How do they make cheese? And that requires something called rennet. And so it is an enzyme that naturally occurs inside the stomach chamber of ruminant animals. And that's what our ancestors did for thousands of years. They retained small amounts of that liquid and they were able to add that liquid to the milk, and that would coagulate the milk so that they could make cheese, right? So our good friends Pfizer realized how widespread cheese consumption was and decided they wanted to take this problem into their own hands and realized this is a very profitable venture, right? So in the early 1990s, Pfizer generated something called FPC. Honestly, I don't even remember what that stands for. Fermentation something. Do you remember what it stands for?
I don't. We wrote about it in the book, but I did not recall what the name is.
Something chymosin, which is like the enzyme. So essentially, it is produced in a lab from a genetically modified enzyme. And so it's actually not really natural. So basically, they will take a gene out of an animal cell's DNA string, and then they'll insert it into a bacteria, commonly like a yeast or a mold. They'll take that DNA, put it into the yeast or mold DNA string, and then that will initiate the production of the chymosin enzyme. And that chymosin enzyme is what coagulates the milk, and that is what's naturally occurring inside the stomach chamber of a cow. And so then the host culture is then like cultivated and fermented. And so the biggest problem here is that this is made in a lab. And so trace amounts of these mold and fungus have been found in these enzymes, which are then used to make the cheese. And so people who are allergic to mold or fungus, it can cause like toxicity or allergenic responses. I personally don't digest cheese well when it's made with this FPC. Like I notice a very big difference in my digestion between animal rennet and this FPC. It's also been shown to disrupt gut health, likely because, you're inserting strange microbial populations into your gut. So there's toxicity, allergenic, and gut health concerns of this FPC. And the best part about it is like the safety of this FPC was evaluated in a 90-day trial with rats. And
it reminds you of COVID a little bit.
yes. And it was the
same
FDA,
company.
Same company. It was granted what's called GRAS, generally recognized as safe. Guys, that means nothing. Like literally that means nothing. Joel Salatin had a great episode covering like what GRAS means, and it essentially puts all the responsibility on like the producer for like evaluating the effectiveness. And so we really don't know the long-term repercussions of consuming this like lab-made rennet. And another thing that some cheese producers realize is you can't replicate Mother Nature in a lab. And so FPC, it creates chymosin, which is just one type. Whereas when you use animal rennet, it's a combination of different enzymes, right? Again, us thinking that we can try to produce something better than Mother Nature, it's funny. We can't, right? And so basically over 90% of the cheese that's consumed in the US today is made using this FPC made by Pfizer. And I think that it is causing a lot of people to not digest cheese well. And another big reason they did this is because using this FPC or other like common terms would be like microbial rennet or vegetable rennet, it allows them to appease vegetarians because then they're not using animal products in the cheese itself. And like I understand that.
Even though the cheese is an animal product.
Exactly. So it was very interesting to learn about that. And again, thanks to Dr. Peat, like I had no idea, but he pointed out you should only buy cheese from animal rennet. He said that a number of times in his writings and his emails. And I was like, what does he mean? So diving in, so I knew that when we started making cheese for our food co-op, I was like, we have to use animal rennet. It's the only option. And sent Dr. Mercola some, and you seem to digest it well compared to other cheeses. I think that there's a number of reasons for that, but one of which is I think it is very important to pay attention to the rennet used when you buy and consume cheese.
So you mentioned that there was 90% of the cheese. I thought it was higher, maybe closer to 95 or even 99%.
The one study that I looked at, I think it was it was in the mid like 2015 era. So at that time it was over 90%. I'm not sure what it is now, but I can only imagine it's over 95%.
Yeah. So you're not the only cheese company in the US that makes this, and many cheese companies in Europe certainly use the animal rennet because it's more done with high-end artisanal cheeses. Because they know that you can't get the high quality you can with the use of synthetic rennet.
Yep. And it just leads to better taste, and it's just like the traditional way of making cheese.
Yeah. So for myself, when I would eat regular cheese in any type of significant amounts, not just half a teaspoon or something, my creatinine ideally should be about 1 to 1.2. And I didn't realize until recently that a creatinine of 1.2 is actually normal if you have a lot of muscle mass, because that's a metabolic byproduct of muscle. If you don't have a lot of muscle mass, then it's not. Then it would be lower. So it would typically go to 1.4, 1.6, even 1.8 at one time. So, and that's concerning because it doesn't seem like a big change, but when you get closer to 2, you're looking at potentially, certainly above 2, you have to be a candidate for dialysis. And who wants that? Dialysis is not fun. Yeah. Before I went to medical school, I was involved with the harvesting kidneys for transplant. I headed up the University of Illinois Kidney Transplant Preservation Lab. And I've had a lot of experience with that, and it's definitely not something you want to engage in if you don't. So I've had a great passion to avoid that if at all possible, and that's why I was so delighted when you gave me that cheese. I loved it so much. I think I was eating a pound or more a day. I actually overdosed on my protein, so it was, which had some problems because that extra protein will damage the kidneys too. So you want to have the sweet spot. But now my most recent one was 1.2, which is perfectly normal for me. So that's one of the biggest joys of my life is to be able to eat cheese again.
Guys, he loves cheese. Dr. Mercola loves cheese. What's your favorite flavor?
I like the mozzarella and jalapeno cheddar, which is a pretty similar to mozzarella. Yeah. And I think you just sent me 4 pounds this morning.
Yep. I think it's important to realize, like, potentially your kidney was having trouble filtering out maybe something that was present in the FPC.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that cat, in my case, and I suspect many others who have compromised renal or kidney function, that would be an issue. So not everyone is going to be able to order from you, because if it's
Yeah.
like your eggs, they'll
Yep.
be gone. The reason we're talking about this is because you're providing this to our
Yeah.
uh,
Exclusive
exclusive. No one
Mercola
else
cheese
can get
box.
this.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Well,
I'm really, we've been waiting to do this for a long time. And, and I think we'll go into this more details, but finish this and then we'll talk about the eggs. Okay. Because
okay.
that's the next we talk about.
So the really exciting thing about this cheese is, like, I really believe it is the highest quality cheese you can find. And it's, so of course it's made with animal rennet, right? The
Of course.
milk is raw milk.
Hmm.
Raw milk is turned into cheese, not heated, so it is raw cheese, and so it still contains the beneficial enzymes, and also it serves as like a probiotic. Well documented in literature that the consumption of raw cheese will improve microbiome balance because you're consuming very beneficial bacteria which get killed when you're consuming pasteurized cheese, right? Um, the cows are 100% grass fed. They're rotationally grazed out on very diverse pastures. Dr. Von Vliet has data showing that cows consuming diverse grass species, that leads to higher levels of phytonutrients in the dairy. And so phytonutrients are commonly what you think is found in fruit and vegetables. It gives it that color, right? Well, phytonutrients can turn up in meat and milk when cows are out on like very diverse pastures through rotational grazing, regenerative agriculture. Vaccine free, needle free. It's made by small Amish like cheesemakers. And so the really exciting thing here, it's like we put together like a partnership of different Amish farmers because we are not trying to do industrial cheese operation, right? Like that's not the goal. Let's make sure that we preserve this like artisan, like handmade traditional techniques, local cheese, now just providing a central market for like this group of Amish cheesemakers producing like the highest quality cheese. And all of the cow's milk is tested to be A2A2. And so that's another important thing, that some people have problems with A1 casein, but this is tested to be A2A2, which not all cow milk is A2A2. A lot of the popular like Holstein cows are A1, and some people have problems digesting that A1 casein protein. Whereas like all dairy from like traditional cow breeds was always A2A2. So that is the main list of benefits, and I am so excited to
Oh,
be able
no,
to
no,
offer
no,
you
no.
guys this cheese.
You left out a really, really important one. You remember?
It's delicious.
Well, that's it is delicious. It's like
Yeah.
one of my I think there's not many people I know that don't like cheese. I mean, unless they have an allergy to it.
There's this really fun meme where it says like, you can fascinate a woman by giving her a piece of cheese or something like that. And like, I feel that so much. I love cheese so much.
Yeah.
But we didn't even talk about, so cheese is a great source of calcium. It has a calcium to phosphorus ratio greater than 1. It also contains lactoferrin, which is helpful in reducing like iron overload and improving like immunity. It also contains vitamin K2 and, super exciting, dairy fat. So cheese is a fat source. Dairy fat is very high in C15, which is an odd chain fatty acid. Dr.
I
Mercola,
knew
would you
you
like to
I
talk
knew you
about?
would get it. That's what I was referring to.
Okay,
Yes.
what would you like?
Yes.
Would you like enlighten us
Well,
on what C15 is? Odd chain fatty
well,
acid.
odd chain saturated fatty
There you
acid,
go.
which is the key. It's saturated,
Yeah.
unlike the others. And it has some special benefits, and so much so. And you cannot manufacture this ostensibly, just like omega-6 and omega-3 fats. So this is an essential fatty acid. It is the first essential nutrient that's been discovered in the last 75 years. So it's called, the scientific name is pentadecanoic acid, C15 for short. And I'm working with Ashley to try to bring this product to market through a very inexpensively, because it is kind of pricey. It's available in dairy products, and the cost of the supplements I've seen on the market costs the same. It costs as much for the supplement as it does for a glass of milk. So it's clearly it's better and more efficient to just drink the milk because you're going to get a lot more nutrients than just C15.
Yeah.
And it's in its natural form.
Yep.
So, but there are some sources that we're investigating to acquire this and bring it to you. But the it has great value. But in the meantime, you could just get it from food. You have to eat enough food, and most people are terribly deficient. You need about 100 milligrams a day, which is interestingly about the amount that's in a cup of milk.
Yeah, which is
Or I
then
don't
in
know
a serving of cheese.
How much of a serving?
I think just one serving of cheese will get you.
What's a serving of cheese? What's the concern? 2 ounces?
Typically,
4
like
ounces?
1 ounce.
1 ounce. Wow.
1 to 2 ounces. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm at 8 ounces a day. I've kind of moderated, so I must be getting a lot of C15.
Yeah.
Now, here's the other thing that's really, really important, because as Ashley and I were investigating bringing this to market, we were seeking to identify the highest sources of plants, because the animals don't make the C15 either. The reason the herbivores, like the cows, have it, and ruminant animals, is because they're eating grass. That's where the plants make the C15, and you get it from the plants. And it just turns out, why don't you share this? Because you're the one who found it by searching an LLM about the interesting serendipity I used to refer to, but now I refer to as the precision of the universe, that has you in the middle of the highest concentration of C15 grasses maybe in the world.
So, okay, just fine tune that, make it really clear. Cows and ruminant animals that are on a grain-based diet in like a confinement operation, they won't have as much C15 in their fat, in their dairy fat. So that's another reason why this cheese is awesome. These cows are outside eating diverse grasses, and in the areas where these cows are is a very high concentration of the grasses that lead to the highest production of C15-0, and that is orchard grass. And Dr. Mercola, I'm failing you. I forgot the second one. Orchard grass and
ryegrass or tall ryegrass?
Fescue?
Tall fescue.
Tall
I
fescue.
think it was.
There we go.
Yeah.
And so we have a high concentration of those. And so that is very exciting. And so basically, I think the most important thing is ensuring that your dairy, if you want to get the most out of this C15, ensuring that wherever you're sourcing your dairy, those cows are out on grass, and not just like a golf course grass, right? There's a huge difference between grass-fed and like rotationally grazed, rotated out on like diverse pastures, right?
World of difference.
Yeah.
Like, and ideally your dairy source should show this, but this is so new. I mean, this information is literally within the last few years, that there's no commercial interest or effort to identify this and do this analysis to show you how much C15 is in it. That would be nice, and then you can choose it, but no one's doing this.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we probably should do that and sort of catalyze the industry to wake up.
And unfortunately, we talked about this on another podcast, mainstream dairy is demonizing saturated fat, and so they're trying to manipulate the fatty acid profile of cows, or like by changing what they're eating, by introducing what they're calling some sort of oils that bypass digestion. What is the name of it?
Rumen sparing oils, I think it was, wasn't it?
So essentially they can, it's, people believe, and it's well known that like you can't, consuming most types of grains that cows consume, they can't really change the fatty acid profile too much. Obviously, this new data about odd chain fatty acid C15-0, that doesn't show up in grain-fed animals. However, the total percentage of like saturated fat, PUFA and MUFA, it's relatively stable due to this process called biohydrogenation, where the ruminants are able to convert PUFAs into saturated fat, typically. However, now they're developing these new feeds where these dietary fats bypass rumen digestion and they just go straight into the milk. And so they're able to increase the PUFA concentration and decrease the saturated fat. And when you read through the literature, it's so funny. The researchers just say, due to the well-known belief that polyunsaturated fats are good for us and saturated fats are bad for us, we are seeking to improve the fatty acid profile of dairy. And it's like, let's just go back to what Mother Nature designed and planned for us and have ruminants out on grass.
Yeah. It almost seems like it's a conspiracy to destroy human biology, to do something so antithetical to human biology. Yeah. So, there's many benefits to this, and if you like cheese and you want this, and what do you think of the supply? Really, I know I have so many projects that we're working. I just didn't go into the details. Will this be sold out in like a day? What?
Well,
I mean, this is a short-term issue. We were working on a long-term, and I wanted to
yeah.
extend that discussion to the chickens in a moment. But let's finish up with this first.
Yeah. I want to say we were able to offer about close to 1,000 to 1,500 boxes per month. But
Okay.
as we grow, it's not going to be like, let's push these farms and make them become industrial complexes.
It's not
No,
going to
no, no.
happen. No.
It's a collection of small scale. And so it's going to involve more coordination, but we've got to keep that like traditional artisan, small batch feel, or else the quality will be sacrificed, right? And so that's the goal, is we're going to build up by increasing total
producers.
There you go. Yep.
The producers. Yeah. You're
Yeah.
no CAFO operation. So
No.
that's a challenge, and that's where you're so expert at, probably maybe one of the best in the world. And
well, okay, let's dive into that real quick. The reason being, Dr. Mercola, is because I want to pay farmers good.
yeah.
If you look at the statistics, you will see that right now, many conventional CAFO dairy farms, they're losing money. They are literally having to get off the farm jobs to support their dairy farming. It's not profitable given how little they're paid in the conventional
have to work for
market.
free to do what they love.
So I want to ask you,
which is your circumstance too, pretty much.
Yes.
And thanks to everyone who contributed to your campaign.
Yes, thank you guys very much.
From Michigan Department of Agriculture that just destroyed $100,000 worth of your product. Some of the healthiest foods on the planet. It was criminal, absolutely criminal.
Your guys' donations single-handedly kept us in business. I'm not lying. So
if you didn't have our support, they would have taken you out, which is unacceptable.
Probably by design. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. They do not want any threat to their business model at all.
Yep.
Zero.
Yep. And so one of our main principles is paying farm partners above market price so that they can actually make a living. And so by you supporting and buying this cheese, you are actually paying a farmer a fair wage. And that, in my opinion, is one of the most important things that we all need to do moving forward so that we can secure small scale farming. If you want high quality food, we've got to bring back traditional farming practices. And the only way to do that is support them and make sure that they're paid enough. The conventional system is not working for farmers, and that's probably by design because it's going to create more and more opportunity for there to just be lab-made food, right? Oh, we don't need farmers anymore. Let's just push them out because then we can have intellectual property and make everything in the lab, but we can't replicate Mother Nature. And so that's a big principle of mine, is like, I don't want farmers to work for negative $5 an hour. That's not what we're here for. Like, that's a huge problem of why America is today and why we're so reliant on fast food. There's a reason fast food and convenient food is so cheap, and it's at the cost of farmers' livelihoods and our land and our human health. And so that's a big priority for me, is I want to make sure that farmers are paid well. The amount of, that's one of my passions, and one of the things that satisfies me the most is providing an opportunity for a farmer to have a market where they can be a farmer. They don't have to have 3 off the farm jobs to support their farm hobby. And so if we realize this, if a farmer doesn't have to work off the farm, they can spend more time being a good land steward, taking care of their animals better, be a better farmer.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. And one of the other projects we're working on together, aside from this, is creating a substitute for vegetable oil or seed oils. There isn't any really good substitute other than natural oils like ghee, coconut oil, beef tallow. Those are really the only 3 that are acceptable. Lard used to be, but because it's really difficult to find pigs and chickens that are raised on very low PUFA diets, they're not healthy fats. They have typically about 20% or more of PUFAs, which is unacceptable.
Yeah, the highest linoleic acid intake is due to conventional chicken.
Yeah. That's a sad commentary, right?
Yeah,
for sure. Which is why your eggs are I think the last analysis was 75-80% lower than a commercial egg.
So basically, you can consume 4 of our eggs and have less linoleic acid than 1 conventional egg.
Yeah, that's now if you're only eating one egg a day, it's not a big issue. But if you're
Yeah.
having more than a few, you're really going to want to uh, seek to get Ashley's eggs. And say, what the heck? I've been on her waiting list for years, and I can't get them. So why don't you give us an update on that?
Yeah, very exciting. Very soon, so early September, we are almost tripling in total number
Oh,
of chickens.
that's
So
crazy.
it's been really fun working. Like, farmers are wanting to be a part of this, right? Like, they're excited about it. And I'm visiting all these different farm partners, making sure everyone's getting in place. It's so exciting. There's so many things going on, but it's so fun. Like, this is what I was meant to do. So very soon we are going to have, it's our goal to make sure that everyone is able to get access to low linoleic acid, low PUFA eggs, because like everyone needs the nutrients in egg yolks. They're just so nutrient packed. Like, an egg yolk has enough nutrients to produce a chicken. Like, that is just a chicken comes out of that. That's so cool. So there's a number of health benefits of regularly consuming eggs, but unfortunately, we've lost touch of what the fatty acid profile of eggs used to be back in the day. Like, I've read extensively USDA or like agriculture articles from like the 1800s, early 1900s. Like, I love reading that stuff. It's so fun. And the fatty acid composition of eggs back then were so different relative to what conventional eggs are today, because corn and soy wasn't like, mainly soy wasn't like this huge agriculture commodity crop that the government subsidizes for us to make it so cheap and abundant. And so we've completely changed what chickens eat. And as a result, we've changed what humans eat. And as a result of that, we've changed how our body functions. And it's clearly not working.
No. So let me continue where I left off on seeking to put a dent in the vegetable oil market by substituting one of those oils and actually introducing typically solid fat at room temperature, which is stearic acid, into a very low PUFA, almost a completely pure saturated liquid fat like coconut oil or MCT oil. And what's required to do this is an emulsifier, and there are a number of different emulsifiers. Unfortunately, the emulsifiers have the PUFAs in them too. Typically, lecithin, that is usually obtained from soy, although safflower lecithin has less PUFA than soy. But even less than that, our egg yolks. There's something that doesn't really exist that we're in the process of creating, which is egg yolk lecithin, and that has very low linoleic acid.
Well, the most exciting thing for me is we're bridging the gap between livestock agriculture and row crop agriculture, and that's how it used to be done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we have row crop farm partners. So we not only have like livestock farm partners, we have row crop farm partners that are producing the feed ingredients for us rather than selling to the conventional market. How cool is that? Now we can shift people who are selling corn and soy to like the conventional system. We can shift them over to selling to us, but they've got to follow regenerative agriculture practices. So no chemicals, no tillage. And so we can, in this process, we can regenerate landscapes across the country by incorporating more row crop farm partners that are, willing to shift what type of crops they grow and also potentially shift their farming practices and not have to continuously degrade their soil with tillage, heavy chemical use. For many producers, the organic solution for weeds is tillage. Whereas if we did more cover crops and keeping the soil covered all year and ensuring that we have like a rich soil microbiome, we won't experience as much weed pressure. So it's just so fun because all of this combines my love of like metabolism, food production, soil health. It's all connected. It really is.
And hearing people hearing you talk would have no idea that your professional training is an engineer.
Yes.
So far from what you're doing now, but it's the same mindset. You're very analytical and you have a passion. You've applied this the skill set you've acquired to solve problems in this area. You've been very effective. So major kudos to what you're doing and continue to do and will do.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk about my passions. without people like you who care, it would be hard to spread this passion and this message far and wide. And so it's refreshing when platforms are actually like interested in soil health, right? Like that's a hard thing to pass to people, but like soil health equals human gut microbiome health. It's one and
Yeah.
the same. So it's important that we take care of both.
Yeah, so I'm grateful that you're providing the resource, because it's hard to do this, and you're working feverishly to expand your production and provide this food to a greater number of people. And the earlier you sign up for the waiting list, the sooner you'll be able to get it once the problem's solved. I would assume that there's some type of time step on when they first applied, and the people who applied first are the ones that get the chicken eggs when they're available.
So just if you sign up for the wait list, I send out a weekly email giving updates and things like that. And like I said, hopefully within the next year, everyone will be able to get their hands on it. And I'm really looking forward to when you guys have your health clinics across the country, because then we can just get better distribution trucks set up. And then
but eventually we'll have them in grocery stores too. It's not there yet, but it's coming down the road. Yeah, for sure. It's great. It's really great. And I'm proud to say that I do not get Ashley's eggs anymore, because my chickens are finally producing.
But we've got to make sure that Grace and Joy protect your chickens so the same thing doesn't happen.
Yeah, well, you got to make sure I solved this problem, but we thought we had a predator. I acquired Joy primarily to protect my chickens and then my egg production. Then I realized that Joy turned out to be an egg predator, because he's eating all the eggs. And we was eating most of my production. I said, how come we're only getting one egg a day now? Joy was eating all the eggs. So we had to rig up a cage and a little chicken gate that Joy cannot fit through, because he's moving on 80 pounds now, and he can't get through this hole that the chickens get through.
Joy is an athlete. Joy is a well-functioning dog that sprints and lots of energy.
I walk on the beach with him every day, and now I'm walking with him without a leash on the beach, which is technically illegal, but he's well controlled, and he listens to my commands, so it works pretty well. It's so good to walk with him on the beach. And then we run back on a leash, of course, which isn't, it's on a street, but I've trained him to sprint, like does multiple sprints, like 100 yards or so, and he's just he gallops as fast as I can ride my bike, which is about 20 miles an hour, which is so amazing. It feels so good to see him galloping next to me.
Hopefully Grace can fit in there.
Yeah, well, she's not able to do that yet, but she'll get there.
Yeah.
All right, anything else you'd like to share before we leave?
If you guys are interested in cheese, it is now available, exclusive Mercola audience cheese boxes. Check that out. We'll be working on increasing supply of that over time. But again, we're not going to push that, because we're not doing confinement operations here. So,
yeah, I'm that's a lot of boxes of cheese, and I'm suspicious that they pretty much won't be available after day one. They'll be gone.
We'll see.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I suspect that. I mean, you're not the only one selling this, but it may be one of the highest quality cheeses you can get, because this is Amish. Essentially, it's better than organic. It's regeneratively grown Amish farmers from some of the best grass in the United States. It's highest in the side chain fatty acids that are essential fat. It's really hard to get.
Yeah.
So, and I did not realize it. So we have to analyze this cheese for C15. We just have to.
For sure.
I will see if we can get that analysis going. Soon. Okay.
Yep.
Because it's going to be through the roof. It's going to a supplement would probably be more expensive than cheese. That's my speculation.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll find out.
I think, and not everyone is going to be able to get this cheese, and so if you aren't, just start to be mindful of your calcium to phosphorus intake. So start with Chronometer, soon to be Food Buddy. When Dr. Mercola is ready to go, I think that paying attention to little variables like that can go a really long way when it comes to metabolic health. And then ultimately that means your longevity and your health 5, 10, 15 years from now. So it may not be something that you almost notice immediately, but it's one of those things that compounds and improves your health time after time after time. So start paying attention to little variables like your calcium to phosphorus ratio to optimize your metabolic health.
Okay. Very wise words of wisdom. So thank you for that encouragement. And getting access to Ashley's food is a big step in the right direction. And then, of course, knowing the material of how to use that food and the reasons why you want to follow that is going to be in my new book coming out really soon. Hopefully,
September?
well, yeah, we had to revector some strategies, and I actually have to I'm in the process of creating 2 new books that go out with it. So we'll probably be launching 3 or maybe even 4 books at the same time. A general reader's guide, a professional reference guide, and a workbook with daily lessons. And the daily lessons book will be maybe 600 pages. It's a lot.
Wow.
And I have to write that in the next week or 2. So it's going to be, it'll be fun. I'm going to enjoy doing that.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
All right. So this is great fun, and I'm so glad we were able to collaborate together and produce good things in this world. And we're going to do a lot of amazing things in the future, and helping people identify and be able to secure some really, really healthy food.
Taking down the industrial food system.
Yes.
One day at a time.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Ashley. Keep up the great work, and we'll connect soon.
Thanks for having me on, Dr. Mercola.
Thanks so much for watching. Remember, hit the like and subscribe button so you can get more videos that can help you and your family take control of your health.